Madam Deputy Clerk, it's 7 p.m. I'm going to call this public planning meeting to order. Council, can get approval of the agenda? Councillor Gilliland. Second, Councillor Gallo. Any comments or questions? Call the vote. That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the proposed official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. For the items that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1, town planning staff will outline the purpose of the items being considered. 2, then the applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues raised in the staff report or public concerns already filed. 3, following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the item. And 4, either town staff or the applicant will answer your questions. I will keep track of the questions, and when I have several, I will direct them to whoever can best answer them. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the matters discussed today. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms and give it to our committee coordinator sitting at the front. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the local planning appeal tribunal. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the Deputy Town Clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 1, PDS 20-020, application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision, Charlieville Limited, 45 Tyler Street, Lot 26, and parts of lots 24, 25, and 27, Plan 9, file numbers OPA-2015-02, ZBA-2015-06, and SUB 2015-03. On February 20th, 2020, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Aurora Banner and Aurora newspapers and mailed to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands, and a notice of public planning meeting sign was posted on the subject lands. Respecting item 2, PDS 20-022, town-initiated official plan amendment to consider backyard swim schools as a permitted home occupation use. On February 20th, 2020, a notice of the public planning meeting was published on the town website and Aurora Banner and Aurora newspapers. Notices were provided as prescribed or to prescribed public bodies and agencies and town ratepayers associations. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you. And Mr. Director, before I go to you to begin the presentations, just wanted to make everyone aware that the first application in regards to 45 Tyler Street, that is currently been appealed to LPAT. So this council does not have jurisdiction to make a decision on that application. There will be a pre-hearing coming up, and Mr. Waters, maybe if you can give that date to the residents, as well as how they could participate in the LPAT process. And just so everyone knows, this right now, currently what is going to be in front of us is just an update and for information for council and for the residents.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The LPAT Case Management Conference, the next one is scheduled for March 27th. I believe it starts at 10 a.m. It'll be held at Town Hall. The appellant is required to give notice of that hearing to residents within a certain distance of the site. If residents wish to participate in the hearing, they can show up and indicate whether they'd like to attend and how they would like to participate. We'll have a notice posted on the town's website shortly to advise of that location of the hearing, the pre-hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durga. Could we also send out notification to the residents in the immediate area? Will we be doing that? The 150-meter radius?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's typically the responsibility of the applicant to advise on notification. They receive the list from staff on the residents and property owners within, it's typically 120 meters.
Okay.
In accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you. So we will start with the procedure. Obviously, everyone come up. Love to hear from you, your thoughts and concerns. But ultimately, if you do want to have those concerns relayed, you should definitely show up for the pre-hearing and make your concerns on whether you want to be a participant or a party to the LPAT process, and make your concerns heard to the adjudicator that will be hearing the case file. So we will, with that, Mr. Director, if we could start the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with the applicant, Charlieville. They'll start with the presentation describing the proposal, the changes made since the last public planning meeting in 2016, and then Anna Henriquez will present some basic planning information regarding the application, the town planner. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of staff, and members of the public. My name is Joanne Barnett. I represent Charlieville Developments, who are the owners of the land. Tonight I have with me Mr. Heath Purtell-Sharp from Groundswell Urban Planning, who is going to push the buttons so that I don't frustrate you with my technical inability, and Nora Batis from Groundswell Urban Planning. I also have with me Peter Slama, who is a principal at Cole Engineering, Dr. Paul Villard, who is the fluvial geomorphologist who has written the reports on stream health and the regeneration of the creek and the natural environment. I have also the two qualified persons who are dealing with the risk assessment. Initially, EXP was retained, and Carly Roselle is the senior project manager with EXP, who's had carriage of the risk assessment. And in the last year or so, Steve Rominski, who is the Toronto manager of Terrapex, is also working on the risk assessment, specifically in dialogue with the MECP. So all of these folks are available to answer questions either from council or the public, and we'll proceed with our presentation if that's in order. The site context, I think, is well known to us all. It's the site of the former Collis Leather Tannery, and it is on 45 Tyler Street, and you can see that from this aerial that the building is no longer there. What I wanted to do was to just refresh. Some members of council were present the first time I stood here in 2013 about this land, and some members of council are new. But I just wanted to go quickly through the history of this application and what has happened since the last public meeting on this matter. On October 30th, 2013, we appeared at council with Carly Roselle from EXP and Dr. Teresa Phillips, who was the chemical expert at the time. On November 28th, 2013, we had a pre-consultation meeting. In September 2014, we appeared at council, and this had to do with the heritage listing for the building. In May 2015, we did some minor remediation on site just to clean it up for an appearance sake. in June 2015, we made our initial submissions for the official plan amendment, zoning bylaw, and draft plan of subdivision. As this was going on simultaneously with our request for a demolition permit for the building and the activity with the Heritage Committee, and it resulted in 2 appearances at council. And as the result of that, council requested that Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority address them on the matter, and Rob Baldwin, the General Manager of Planning and Development from LSRCA, addressed council in 2015. On October 2015, a demolition permit was approved by council and issued, and the structure was demolished. A permit was issued by Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority shortly thereafter to import clean fill and to do minor regrading at the demolition site to fill in the foundations. All soil with MECP exceedances that is required to be removed from the site was removed from the site during this period of time under the supervision of EXP's qualified person, and all documentation was provided to the district officer, MECP. And I will acknowledge Angela, who's here, who kept our feet to the fire, and we were able to move that material out successfully with wheel washing stations and with the residents helping us to make sure that everything was carried out in accordance with the appropriate protocols. And all of that material was moved to a licensed receiver, and there is now no more material to be removed from this site because of MECP exceedances. In March 2016, clean fill was imported to the site under the LSRCA permit, and whatever work we were able to do under that permit was done, and the site was capped with gravel and hoarded, and remains to this day. In May of 2016, May 25th to be exact, we had the first public planning meeting, which was at that point called a statutory public meeting. We heard from a number of members of the public and have, in subsequent submissions, addressed all the issues that were raised at that meeting. In June 25th, 2017, we made a second submission. On September 29th, 2017, we made a supplementary submission to address some comments that came along after the fact. On June 12th, 2018, at the request of the district officer of the Ministry of the Environment, we held a risk assessment, PIC, at the library that was advertised throughout the town. And on January 31st, 2019, we made our third submission on the Planning Act matters. December 2nd, 2019, we made a fourth submission. February 2020, we have made a supplementary submission on the fourth submission, and here we are today on March 10th with a public planning meeting that certainly is in order given the length of time and the number of things that have occurred. What's on the screen now is the current draft plan as of December 2019, and it's a resubmission. It has really very minor changes. It creates blocks, a development block and open space blocks. The block D, landscaped open space, has changed because the area that sticks out, this is unfortunately flipped over. If you can imagine that north is this way, the block that's sticking out at the top there was, we had intended to make it recreational space, but working with Angela and her committee, we agreed that it would be left to be naturalized along with the rest of the block. So block D is a naturalized and landscaped open space block, which is part of the regeneration. Similarly, Block B and Block C which have the treed slope, are also intended to be left, and Block A is the proposed residential development. We filed a draft plan of subdivision because the intent is to do a common element condominium, and it requires that it be a block on a draft plan of subdivision. Moving to the current proposed site plan as of December 2019 resubmission, it shows pretty much the same as it's always been, with the exception of some reorientation of units. It's 70 townhouse units on private condominium roads intended to be served by private services and to be discrete from the blocks which will not have the landscape green blocks which will not have public access, with access onto Tyler Street. This plan has not changed materially, with the exception of in the upper right-hand corner, those blocks were shifted to allow for the removal of the culvert and the creation of a conveyance channel in concert with our ongoing work with the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority. So those blocks were shifted a little bit to the west, but other than that, the plan has not changed. The next slide is the typical elevations. The top one is a linear block that shows the 3-story townhouses. Early on, we met with a committee of the immediate neighbors and discussed architecture and what they would be comfortable with, and we presented a typical, more traditional elevation. We build with brick because the owners of this land also own Brampton Brick, and we presented a number of colored elevations to them, and they were generally okay with the look of the project. And so we have not changed the elevations materially since that time, just some minor design tweaks that were recommended by the town's consultant. The bottom elevation is to illustrate what the units that are fronting on Tyler Street would look like. And the thinking there is there will be 3 units that present to Tyler Street as end units in the block, but the visual impact is the equivalent of 3 single dwellings to keep the streetscape of Tyler consistent with what it is today, and that's why they've been oriented in that manner. Progress since the last public meeting and next steps. Since the first public meeting, the application's been through an initial submission and 3 resubmissions to address circulation comments. The risk assessment PIC was held on June 12, 2018, as requested by the MECP district officer to present information surrounding the risk assessment process, provide an update on the current proposal, and give an opportunity for questions and discussions with the consulting team. 14 persons attended that meeting, and their comments were noted and they were addressed in the 4th submission. One comment asked for the earth pile that was on the site, the clean fill, to be capped with granular because she had some specific breathing issues that her son had, not that she was intimating that this pile was of any danger to her, but she just requested out of an abundance of caution that we cover it with granular, and we did that immediately. The unit counts and the parking space counts have remained the same. The limits of development and the environmental protection blocks were adjusted slightly, as I alluded to, including the increase to the landscaped open space to allow for the removal of the culvert and the conveyance channel. Some minor realignment and rotation of the blocks has occurred to facilitate the floodplain improvement works that I discussed previously. Floodplain improvements and channel design changes have occurred in consultation with LSRCA. Existing 50-meter-long culvert near Tyler Street is proposed to be removed and a new channel floor established with armored side slopes, thereby creating additional floodplain storage volume and lowering the overall flood elevation, benefiting all adjacent parties. This is new since the last time we were here and became part of the most recent fourth submission after a discussion with the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, and our engineer Peter Slama is here to speak to that if there are any questions. So we are working towards a resubmission supplementary to the fourth submission for a few technical comments that came in late, and we will address in a supplementary submission any comments that are received tonight that have not been addressed. This Planning Act process is running lockstep with a risk assessment process, and I'm going to ask Carly and Steve to give you an update on the risk assessment. Before I do that, we were given 4 emails from the general public that the planning department received, and we were asked to make written submissions on those. We've done that, and we've submitted an email response to Mr. Walters. It's lengthy. I hesitate to take up your time to read it into the record, but it is the answers are provided. If those questions come up tonight, we're happy to answer them, but unless you would prefer me to read it into the record, I'll just leave it as it is.
I think it's fine. I think I'll ask Mr. Waters also to send it to each individual member as well.
With the update by Steve and Carly, that will conclude our presentation, and we look forward. Just a brief reflection on the staff report. It's an excellent report. We take no issue with it at all, and we do concur with the recommendations that staff are making. So we'll ask Carly and Steve to finish up and take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I'm Carly Roselle from EXP. We've been handling the risk assessment with the help from Steve Ruminski from Terrapex. So since the last public meeting was we've had a number of submissions to the Ministry of Environment with edits to the risk assessment. It's an iterative process that we revise the risk assessment based on comments from the ministry. So we will be submitting a third submission, Addendum 3, this week. And as part of this submission, we prepared a conceptual risk management plan in which the risk management measures that we intend to implement at the site were detailed, and that was provided to the town as well as the LSRCA for comment. So based on those comments that we received, we've incorporated those into the risk assessment and risk management plan. And these risk management measures are being proposed to protect both on and off-site human and ecological receptors based on the contamination that we found on site. So also as part of the risk management plan, we have included several ongoing monitoring programs that will be implemented to make sure that risk management measures on site remain intact, that their integrity is maintained, and that also we are maintaining, making sure we are maintaining or improving ecological health on site. One element of the risk management plan is to have the naturalized areas remain naturalized, and in doing that, we will be surrounding them by fencing to prevent human access. And this is done to ensure that these well-established ecosystems can remain intact and continue regenerating.
Okay, and then with the outcome of the risk assessment is when it's approved by the MECP, they issue what's called a certificate of property use. And that's an instrument that the MECP uses to make sure that these risk management measures are implemented and are maintained. So that way the ministry can keep record to make sure they are maintained properly. and the risk management plan is overseen by a qualified person who prepared the document, so it ensures that the risk management measures are maintained in perpetuity, or as long as contamination remains at the site. And the QP who prepared those documents is Carly, so she'll be overseeing the implementation of those risk management measures. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Waters, are we having a presentation from staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Staff will provide a presentation describing the existing official plan designation and the proposed official plan designation and zoning bylaw as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, and members of the public. We are here to discuss an update on the subject development applications at 45 Tyler Street, so specifically the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. So just to provide a little bit of context and background information on the applications, an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision was submitted to the town in 2015. A statutory public meeting was held in May 2016 to present the applications. At that time, comments were presented by council and the public. Council directed staff to come back with a second public planning meeting. 2017, the applicant appealed the applications to the local planning appeal tribunal as council had not made a decision. With respect to the proposal, the official plan amendment proposes to designate the lands to stable neighborhoods and environmental protection, whereas it is currently designated as stable neighborhoods, existing employment, brownfields, industrial, employment protection, and private parkland. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would rezone the subject property to townhouse dwelling residential, exception zone R8, and environmental protection. The draft plan of subdivision identifies 4 blocks, 1 for residential use and 3 for open space. The residential block is proposed for 13 townhouse blocks with a total of 70 units. Future applications required include site plan, plan of condominium, and part lot control. Okay, the site is approximately 7.2 acres or 2.9 hectares in size and has a frontage of approximately 130 meters onto Tyler Street. The property is surrounded by an existing residential community consisting mostly of single detached dwellings, as well as an apartment building southeast of the site. An elementary school and park is located south of the property. So from a policy perspective, the proposed applications will be reviewed in the context of all provincial, regional, municipal, and policy documents as listed on this slide. The site is currently designated as existing employment brownfields, industrial. There are stable neighborhoods, environmental protection, and private parkland. There are policies in the official plan that recognize the site for appropriate redevelopment for residential uses in accordance with the Aurora Concept Plan urban design strategy. An employment land conversion is not required. So with respect to the proposed OPA, it seeks to redesignate the site to stable neighborhoods and environmental protection, as well as increase the height to 11.5 meters, whereas up to 9 meters or 3 stories is currently permitted. Since the first public planning meeting, boundaries of the EP designation have been amended to include the culvert at the northeast corner of the site. This culvert is now proposed for removal and will be further discussed, and was further discussed in the applicant's presentation. With respect to the existing zoning, the subject lands are currently zoned employment, general employment, and environmental protection. So the proposed site-specific zoning bylaw amendment, as previously mentioned, would be to rezone to townhouse dwelling residential exception, R8. The exception zone seeks to introduce site-specific changes, including specific standards for lot area, lot frontage, setbacks, height, encroachments for open porches, decks, and terraces, as well as driveway widths. Since the first public planning meeting, the EP zone has been expanded to include the culvert at the northeast corner of the site, as mentioned on the previous slide. So the proposed draft plan of subdivision, identifies 4 blocks, 1 for residential use, again, to facilitate the development of 13 townhouse blocks with a total of 70 units. The proposed plan of subdivision, as mentioned by the applicant, is required to create a residential block and a plan of subdivision to facilitate a future common element condominium. In terms of the application review, the 4th submission has been received and is currently under review by staff. Staff are reviewing for compatibility and appropriateness of the proposed applications. Staff is also reviewing the results from the ministry's review of the risk management plan, incorporation of the town stream management master plan recommendations, integration of the Aurora Promenade concept plan, urban design guidelines, and any other comments received from agencies and town departments. With respect to next steps, staff will work with the appellant to address the comments received on their 4th submission, and as from tonight's discussion. The next LPAT pre-hearing conference is scheduled for late March, and an update on the status of the applications will be provided. Recommendation report will be presented at a future council meeting once ministry approval is addressed. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll mention that again. Councillor Gardner would like me to mention, and I thought I got that across at the beginning, but just in case, we will not be, this council does not have the jurisdiction or authority at this point to approve any OP amendments, zoning changes, as this has now been appealed to LPAT. And if anyone doesn't know what LPAT is the new and improved, I guess, OMB, which is not really improved, but I won't get into a long-winded explanation of what my thoughts are on that, but it falls within their jurisdiction, which is a provincial body, so it's out of council's hands at this point. Mr. Waters, would you like to explain why this is in front of us at this moment, considering it is at LPAT?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. As was indicated in the presentation, this was first brought forward to council as part of a public planning meeting in 2016. Subsequent to that, the applicant did appeal to LPAT in 2017. The direction given in 2016 was to bring it back prior to the appeal. So we're honoring that direction at this point in time. Even though it's not a requirement anymore, we feel that it's important to honor council's previous direction to bring it back because it's on this 4th submission, and we feel it's important for council and the public to see how it's progressed to date.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. And before obviously, I'm going to open it up to the public. So if there are any members of the public that would like to come up and speak, come on down. If I gotta have you state your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes, Angela.
Okay. Hi, my name's Angela Dest, and I live at 31 Tyler Street in Aurora. And I've been discussing this development with area residents since it was first proposed. Since that time, it has become very clear that the developer is attempting to put far too many and far bigger structures for housing than this site can accommodate. To date, they have applied for reductions in minimum lot sizes, minimum setbacks, and now they're applying for an exemption to the planning bylaw for height. My husband and I renovated our 140-year-old Victorian home approximately 25 years ago. At that time, we were told that we could not expand the footprint of our house or add any fill to our property because of the EP zoning due to the proximity of the stream on our property. We were told by Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority that these restrictions were in place due to the environmentally sensitive nature of the area. During the process of applying for permits with the town of Aurora, we were also told that there was a strict height restriction in the area because the majority of structures in the area were 1.5 to 2-story single-family dwellings, and that we could not go above the height allowance in the planning bylaw. We adhere to every requirement both the town of Aurora and Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority had laid out. This new development, 45 Tyler Street, is well within a flood zone designated by the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority. I'm not sure where your overhead is, but it's right, the flood zone. The general rule for flood zone is that structures cannot be built within it. However, because there is an existing structure on this property, several dwellings that add up to the footprint of the original structure can be built. However, if any area is to be filled with soil, the equivalent amount of the area would need to be cut to accommodate the volume of flood water that could occur during a 100-year storm event.
Angela, I don't want to cut you off, but if you just pass that picture, we'll put it up on the screen for everyone to see.
That's the that's right from their regulation mapping. Thank you. Lake Simcoe. According to the developer, the proposed townhouses are supposed to be built on top of a 3-foot berm of soil to be brought in. I was assured by the developer that no cutting of soil would need to be done to accommodate this. And this is one of my questions. How can this be when we were told that there's only way that soil can be added to the property is if there is a cut done on another part of the property? This has a potential to impact the flooding of surrounding neighbors who have adhered to the no-fill policy of the area. This also brings me to the question of the exception to the planning bylaw's height restriction. If the developer is given the exception, not only will the height of these structures be taller than any other house in the area, they will also be 3 feet taller than that because they will be sitting on top of a berm. This will overshadow immediate neighbors, blocking sunlight and reducing any privacy they have. The height of these townhouses is not in keeping with the historic nature of the area. Most of the houses in the area are well over 100 years old. Nor is the density and small yard frontages that are proposed, this is from the last meeting, and this is all the exceptions that they have applied for in terms of frontages, lot sizes, and height restrictions. I would also like to know how the EP designation of the area can be changed. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Are they trying to change the EP designation for some areas? I'm not sure. There's a stream on the property and Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority map clearly showing that this property is well within the flood zone. I think that if one resident, such as myself, is required to adhere to the planning bylaw, then a developer shouldn't be allowed to break these restrictions 70 times, once for each proposed unit. We are not opposed to development of this site. We'd love to see it developed. But we want to see it developed in keeping with the planning bylaw so that it will not impact neighbors and that is in keeping with the historic nature of the neighborhood. And just one quick thing, just for Joanne, the proposals are very nice, it's just the height. Like, I like the way they look, but it's the height, and the residents agree that we like the way it looked. It's just, it's too high, and the properties are too small. It just needs to be more in keeping with the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Barry, come on down. Barry, if I can get you to state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Barry Bridgeford, 113 Temperance Street, and I filled out one of the green sheets earlier. My concern is that public green, that is natural open space, should be established alongside the watercourse located on the property, running all the way from the town of Aurora Lions Park and York Region District School Board properties to the south, onward to Tyler Street to the north, with sufficient width for the town to construct a public pedestrian creekside trail. Establishing such a pedestrian trail would effectively link existing sections of hiking trail to the south and north. The town of Aurora's Lions Park and York Region District School Board properties to the south already have a creekside pedestrian trail, as do Fleury and Machel Parks a short distance to the north. Establishing such a linked trail would result in a continuity for hiking all the way from the future Highland Gate Trail system to the south, onward to the recreational park system south of Orchard Heights Drive. Now, in support of this concern, I refer to the town's own report, PDS 16-038, page 4, in which stated, quote, lands associated with the regulated floodplain combined with the balance of the property to the east of the watercourse should remain as green open space, providing a formalized pedestrian link between Tyler Street and the George Street Public School. I did have at one time a concern over the culvert, the buried culvert. I gather that's going to be remediated out and converted to a conventional creek profile, so I'm happy with that. Now, the report that's before us from the planning department included a replacement page, page 23 of 26. And since this is part of the town's report and it alludes to certain uses, and I realize the applicants would like to have private parkland running alongside the creekway, I'm a bit taken back that this portrayal shows private parkland to the south and to the northeast. Now, I've subsequently looked at the official plan, and I must say, in my opinion, the official plan as it relates to this area is in gross error. And it has been from 2010 to 2015 to the present day. It appears that on that official plan, the coloring of certain areas was done incorrectly, because we certainly do not have private parkland to the south of the applicant's property, and we definitely don't have it to the northeast, and yet this document clearly shows that that's the official plan. So I would put it to the town staff and to town council that we have a gross error in our official plan. And I believe that should be remedied before any real consideration should be given to perpetuating private parkland on the applicant's property when it's really not in existence around the applicant's property. I maintain that there's better represented continuity of use with public parkland. And thirdly and lastly, there was mention of the risk assessment. I'm wondering, has there been any measuring, any reporting on the presence of cobalt carbonate and chromium dioxide in the creek bank on the west side? Having been a youth in this area, I recall that there were open surface dye pits at one time. They were capped with clay. But over the decades, I've seen them bleeding out through the profile of the West Creek Bank. I used to pick up crystals of cobalt carbonate and add them to my mineral collection. So I don't know if that was excavated along with the basement area of the building, or whether there's still remnants that have to be considered when the creek profile is adjusted. Thank you.
On that map, are you looking at it on yours? Do you see the grayed out area? That grayed out area is considered private parkland, and the top part, yeah. So that's what he's speaking. Hello, if I can get you to state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
David Kebianka, 34 Tyler Street. Before I start, actually, I do have a question for, I'm sorry, was Barbara, was the representative?
Dave, we got to keep it here. You'll ask the questions to us, and then we'll ask it to them.
I just have a question, I guess, that was raised from her presentation. Quoting from the developers' representatives that was presented today, if all issues were addressed from the concerns raised at the statutory public meeting of May 25th, 2016, and this is quoting from her, because she said that all concerns were raised, or were dealt with, why is the developer asking for an exemption for the bylaw height restrictions now? Because that was one of the major concerns that I raised, my partner raised, and numerous other people raised on the May 25th, 2016 meeting. So I'd just like to bring up that question. So to the Aurora Town Council, we would like to ask the city to maintain height and building setback from the street restrictions. In particular for those units, and this is what I asked at that meeting, for those units directly on Tyler Street, If units are shorter on Tyler Street, they'll maintain the feeling of a neighborhood and act as a transition or gate to the taller dwellings behind. This should have minimal effect on the profitability for the developer, but it will help maintain quality of street experience for the rest of us on Tyler Street. Height restrictions should also include the top ridge line of the roof line. Should the developer want a pitch of 60 degrees, then the maximum number of stories should be reduced to 1 for those units on Tyler Street. Or to put it another way, use the existing house roof ridge maximum as a basis for a maximum ridge height for the units along Tyler Street. I'm asking for a setback in building, not just from the street, but actually, as we repeatedly asked for the Aurora Church a couple years ago. We would like to ask the city not to grant exemptions for the setbacks from the Tannery Creek that runs through the property. Aurora has already produced a study that this is area is a flood zone. Tyler Street is listed as erosion site number 6 in the water management report. The amount of impermeable surface this development will create will increase flooding for those of us downstream from the proposed development. The developer's proposed cistern solution is insufficient. Right now, Tannery Creek rises 48 inches in 25 minutes when it rains 30 millimeters in any 24-hour period. So this is my backyard, repeatedly flooding in 20 minutes. So it's not going to get any better based on what they're proposing. Upstream changes to Tanner Creek water flow and development on Tanner Creek for the Highland Gate development have greatly affected the enjoyment of our property. Any further concessions and exemptions to the current regulations will only increase what is already a severe flooding issue. It should be noted that current water management bylaws were written in a period when extreme weather occurrences were rare. I mean, that 100-year thing, that happened, like I said, this is 3 years of flooding. Now that we're dealing with the reality of climate change, it makes no sense to weaken bylaws through concessions when those bylaws were written for a climate condition that no longer exists. And lastly, regarding a density of 70 units, the city of Aurora should not grant an exemption for the density of a dwelling unit. There's no reason why homeowners should be forced to live in cramped living conditions that are found in Hong Kong or New York. No one will force persons to buy these units, but neither should the developer be allowed to profit from the desperation of persons seeking to live in the GTA. We recognize the need for more housing, but such housing should include a concern for quality of life, not just profit. Any developer who claims a concern for quality of life is not telling the truth. Developers have a responsibility and fiduciary duty to their company to maximize profit. It's the responsibility and duty of elected officials to maintain the well-being and quality of life for their citizens now and for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the public? Welcome. If I can just get your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Tom Hashem, 76 George Street. I'm not quite directly affected by this development, as some of the other people have already spoken. I do have a couple of questions for the town council, just to clarify things. I know the OMB was dissolved. There were a few cheers from some people I know, including myself. I did not realize there's a new organization that's now taken its place with a different designation, but obviously somewhat similar aims. Can you tell me if, I mean, some of the comments have been made, I think are very fair and important, but do you have any jurisdiction over these amendments or changes? Does the town of Aurora have any ability to mitigate some of the exceptions that the developers have asked for?
Unless it's a settlement. If a settlement comes back from I'll answer this one right away just so we can get it out of the way.
Sure, thanks.
So if the way it works is that there will be a hearing. If the town and the applicant work towards a settlement, that settlement agreement would come before this council in a closed session, and we would discuss whether we would approve that settlement or not, or whether we would take it to a full-out hearing. And then once it goes to a full-out hearing, we would argue the merits of the case, and then it would be an adjudicator that would decide on whether they would grant those amendments and changes, not this council.
Okay, fair enough.
So the only way we would make a decision is if it came as a settlement.
Got it. So in other settlements, previous settlements, the OMB essentially were the adjudicator. Is this the case now with this new group, LPAT?
It's the exact same process.
Got it. So it is difficult for the town, even if the town objected to certain exceptions that the developers asked for. It's difficult for the town to. You can't make a decision, basically. You can't say you can't do this. Is this correct?
It's a de novo hearing, so basically they start from scratch if it goes to a hearing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Fair enough. And the length of time for this process from today forwards, roughly a year, 2 years, longer, shorter?
How long would the process be? After the pre-hearing? On the
Yes.
26th?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is that the LPAT is now scheduling hearing dates in early 2021. So you're looking at the next date for a hearing scheduled likely either end of the year or in early 2021.
Okay, and one other question. How many parking spaces have been allocated for these town houses? Does anybody
I'll
know?
ask that one when I start asking all the questions. That one I'll ask when we ask all the questions.
Okay, fair enough.
I just wanted to get the LPAT stuff out of the way because I'm sure that's very,
Well, I just felt that, I mean, everything that's been mentioned and raised is important. I realize the developers have put a lot of work into mitigating the long-term effects, the long-term pollutive effects of the tannery, and I realize they have to make money on it, and I understand that. It's 70 townhomes in a very kind of old neighborhood of Aurora, in a fairly tight 7 acres with height exceptions and other exceptions. I think it's too much personally, but if the town can't really do if you can only fight it but not necessarily win, then that says something there. Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you. Is there any other members of the public? Welcome. I can just get you to state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Frank Keller, and I'm at 78 George Street. What I wanted to find out, and this is the first meeting I've attended, so forgive my ignorance, but has there been a traffic study undertaken as a result of the 70 new townhomes that are supposedly or proposed? And what kind of impact, if the study has been done, will that have on the immediate neighborhood?
I'll ask that when we get to all the questions.
That's really all I have to ask.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any other? I can get you to state your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Sandra Sangster, 46 Holman Crescent. I'm on the executive of the Regency Acres Ratepayers Association, and I hadn't really planned on speaking, but I would just like to offer, I guess, support of the residents who have spoken this evening. We have gone through very lengthy discussions over 2 years regarding height and the zoning bylaws related to height and the impact that that has on the existing homes, and we would like to support that being raised as a concern. I also noted in the report the mitigation plan or risk assessment plan to not have basements, and to me that's a red flag. If there's still potentially a concern about contamination such that it may not be advisable to allow basements to be included in this townhouse development, to me that just raises more questions, which perhaps council really should think about. I also I was planning on also raising the concern about the traffic and parking issue, as well as, now I realize they're talking about doing this as a slab, but the whole issue about elevation. In Regency Acres, we now know that many of these infill homes have at least one or more sump pumps in their basement because water issues have not been adequately addressed. When you're talking about numerous properties that are going to be on a creek that's prone to flooding, as was dramatically illustrated in the photo that was just shared by one of the residents, I don't think that we are adequately dealing with the whole issue of groundwater and creeks and flooding and weather events and so forth. So that's really all I'd like to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing none. Mr. Waters, do you want to start with the questions that you have?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. I will try to answer these the best I can, but I may
the
defer to the applicant to provide the technical response in case I misstep or have a gap in my my response. Let me just see here.
Do you want me to start with, how about the traffic study?
The
and
traffic
impacts?
study, yes, sir. There was a Cole Engineering undertook a traffic impact, site access, and parking study. It was reviewed internally by staff, and it was determined that it satisfied the requirement for 70 townhouse units on site.
Okay, and parking, how many parking spots do we? Can we maybe get a total number of parking spots and then maybe how many visitor parking spots?
So there are 21 visitor spots required. We're providing 25.
And how much, and how many parking spots per resident?
2 spots.
2 per.
2 per, is that what you said? Okay,
One in the garage, one in the driveway.
thank you. Mr. Waters, did you want to answer, could you answer Mr. Bridgeford's questions in regards to chromium dioxide and cobalt in the area?
Through Mr. Mayor, I will defer to the applicant's consultant to deal with the contamination issue, if you don't mind.
So I think the question pertained to contamination within the creek, if I recall correctly. So yeah, we've done extensive sampling within the creek and soil around the creek and in the groundwater, including for cobalt and chromium, the 2 contaminants that were brought up. We have found contamination of certain parameters related to the tannery. In general, looking at LSRCA data downstream of the creek in the sediment, it seems to be largely contained on site. And so this is where we implement risk management measures to protect human receptors from being exposed to these contaminants. This is seen as more beneficial or a more positive outcome than digging up the entire naturalized area in order to remove those contaminants.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What other questions do you have?
I believe there was a comment about having a pedestrian trail next to the creek. My understanding is, well, I've looked at the Trails Master Plan for the town, and there is no pedestrian connection identified in this area. I believe the creek will remain in private ownership as well, and it's going to be fenced off because of the contamination that's my understanding.
Yeah, so further, kind of on the same line, because of the contamination in and around the creek, we have proposed that it be fenced to prevent human access because of risks that have been identified in the risk assessment. And this was seen as a better, more positive option as opposed to digging up the whole area based on numerous studies that have shown, as I'm sure the residents are aware, really well-established ecosystems in the area.
The other part is there will be stabilization of the creek, including bioengineering and naturalization. And if there's access in there and the areas get trampled, it will create future erosion problems. So basically, it's being stabilized for protection of the public.
Thank you. And I think it was asked, are the EP zones, EP areas being changed? Are the EP areas, the environmental protection areas, are they being changed?
Are we changed? Oh, no change.
It was asked. I'm just asking it again. So they are being changed.
They're being fenced, but I don't think they're being changed.
I'm sorry. I didn't quite catch the question.
Are the EP areas being changed?
The area...
Being changed is the zoning.
EP, environmental protection areas, are they being changed?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
They are being changed.
Yes. The residents of the condominium will not have access to the EP zone. It will be fenced off, and the declaration and bylaws will not permit access. It's not for use by the condominium. It's a naturalized area to remain, to naturalize without human interference.
No, I get that. I think that, Joanne, I think the question from the resident was, is that currently the EP zones, the areas are configured a certain way. They're the environmental protection areas. Are those areas being changed?
The
footprint,
environmental
thank you.
protection area is being refined. It's
Thank
being,
you.
which the official plan suggests needs to occur.
Thank you, and I think that's what the resident was.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Mr. Waters, do you have anything? Oh, I have one more. David, you asked May 25th, 2016 meeting. They spoke to all the residents and about their concerns, and if that's the case and listen to those concerns, why is the exemption for the height still here? Joanne?
Yes, I hear the concern that's been expressed about some of the exceptions that we've requested to the R8 zone. What I will, with prejudice, undertake to do is to review these, and we'll do two things. We believe this is an urban form, and we have done the sight lines, and we don't believe there's any visual impact to the residents in the area. But what we're going to submit to staff will be a cross-section to show the sight lines, and we will also work with our architect to see if we can improve the height. We think we can do something at the roof pitch and deal with that. So we will, with prejudice, undertake to resubmit something that will address the height issue.
Thank you. Mr. Waters, do you have any other questions?
I think it's important to point out that there is an existing flooding situation at the moment. This portion of the creek was identified as part of the stream master plan that was presented to you earlier. The works being done on private property to increase the flood storage and improve the ecological function of the creek is being done at the cost of the developer. He's paying the ticket on that, and that includes removing the box culvert that's there at the moment to increase the flood storage.
Thank you. I was just about to ask if anyone would like to come up for a second time. I just need you to restate your name and your address again. 5 minutes.
And 34 Tyler Street. I just want to respond to the applicant's response. Height, vision access or sight lines are only part of the reason why there's a concern for height. It has to also do with the character of the street. So sure, they can come up with a plan that has sight lines that are taken care of and they're unobtrusive, but you know, if you go to a European city or you go to the village in Osborne Village in downtown, the fact that it has a certain character has a lot to do with its height. So by changing the height to be significantly different than what we currently have, she called it an urban form. I'm a little bit, I'm shocked and offended to hear that. I've wanted to live in a residential historic area, so now that she wants to make it urban, I'm offended. So that's my response to that.
Thank you. Barry, if I could get you to state your name again and your address.
Barry Bridgeford, 113 Temperance. We've just heard a description of the private parkland being fenced off because apparently the level of contamination in that land area is substantial enough to be of concern that, one, the public does not get in there, and two, the residents of the development do not get in there. Now, I have questions of that private parkland fenced off. Who will be legally liable for the integrity of the fences, of the vegetation cover? In other words, there's access is going to be restricted for the safety of people. Who's going to maintain that? Who's responsible for that? And if there, say for example, erosion started in an area, who would remediate reestablishment of vegetation? Would that be the town or a condominium group. And again, also, if there were, for example, on the private parkland, an outbreak of an invasive plant. Right now, on the subject property, on the applicant's property, there is a substantial outbreak of Japanese knotweed, which has been legislated under provincial legislation as a registered not obnoxious, but invasive plant. And that's growing quite nicely there. But if that gets into the wild area, who's going to be responsible for controlling it?
I'll get.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Angela, did you? Oh, we're not there. We still got some members of the public coming up for a second time. Yes, that's fine. Angela, if I could just get you to state your name and your address again, please. Thank you.
Angela Dest, 31 Tyler Street. I just have a really quick question as to the position of where the fence is going to be. Is it going to be on the west side of the creek or on the east side? It's just that area is quite a major wildlife corridor. We have we have so much stuff coming down our driveway, like coyotes and raccoons and possums and everything, and they all come down our driveway, go behind the garage, and then through the back property along the other creek. And I'm just wondering if it's all fenced off, how are they going to get through? Also, that area, there seems to be in behind our house, there's like a well type thing with pipes running actually through one of my neighbor's backyard, and we're just wondering what's going to happen with that stuff. It's great that culvert's being removed. I think that's awesome. But is that going to be the basic cut and fill? Is that how you're going to accommodate the berm for the townhouses, by cutting and making a larger flood area? And last time it was mentioned that there was some underground cistern that was going to store water. I wonder if that's still on the table, or has that been taken away because of the culvert being opened up? Just a couple of questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Any other members of the public? Mr. Waters, who will be legally liable for maintenance, et cetera, the town or the condo board?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding it's the condo corporation, but I'll have the applicant's consultant confirm that.
I see a nod of the head, but sure.
Land will be under the management and belong to the condominium corporation, and Mr. Ruminski, as late as yesterday, in response to a written query, had a conversation with the MECP as to the effectiveness of that. There would be restrictive covenants on the measures, and that the qualified person would be retained by the condominium corporation to regularly inspect and monitor and have carriage of any work or any necessary incursion into the environmental protection zone. So the qualified person is an ongoing reality in this for as long as there is any contamination, which will be as long as we're here.
Joanne, you might as well stay up here because I think you'll probably have to answer a few of the next ones. The fence, west side or east side of the creek?
What?
The fence, west side or east side of the creek?
That's a good question.
Both?
I think the fence would be on the limit of the EP.
Okay, and I guess what type of fence, because how will wildlife be able to get through?
How will?
Is the fence, is it a certain type of fence that you're looking at putting up? Certain type of fencing?
All right, I'm going to let Carly answer.
That will allow access for wildlife to be able to get through?
Yeah, so the LSRCA has specific guidelines about any fencing that gets put within the floodplain. So we will be following those guidelines. Off the top of my head, I think one of the options is kind of wrought iron fencing, which must allow for spaces for wildlife to go in between. So we'll be complying with the requirements in the conservation lands.
Okay, and then Mr. Waters, the berm and cut and fill. Did you get that one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the cut and fill, is intended to provide for modification to the flood line. So, I mean, they'll have to basically deal with the storage that's lost through the cut and fill. So it's to facilitate increasing the storage for the creek. And that is subject to LSRC approval.
Thank you. And the underground system, is that still happening? The underground system?
Good evening. Yes, the underground stormwater management tank is still part of the proposal. It's about 300 cubic meters of volume. That's about 300,000 liters. And that is there to control the storm runoff that's being generated from the site itself.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any members of the public that would like to come up for a third time or for a first time? Seeing none, I will close the public portion of the meeting. And everyone wants to speak. Would someone like to move the recommendation before? Councillor Gilliland, second. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gallo, you're up first.
Thank you. I just had a question to the, I guess, the developer or representative. Considering this is going to LPAT, and you've appealed it in 2017, you had every right to do so. I really would love to hear what you're expecting to get out of tonight's meeting.
Joanne?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a good question. The referral to the LPAT was not done out of any concern that we had in working with Aurora. We believed that what we were doing was had a net benefit and an immense gain. If you recall, and I'm sure Mayor Marakis recalls this vividly, the rules changed at a certain period of time, and we didn't know whether or not there would be third-party appeals. And so we wanted our application to be heard under the old rules, which are now the new rules, but at the time, who knew that? So we appealed out of an abundance of caution, but we advised the council of the day that our intent was to continue to work with the municipality, continue to work with the community, and bring this to, we hope, to conclusion that everyone would be satisfied that that there had been a public benefit gained by this. So our request, we support the staff recommendation. We'd like to continue to work with your staff towards a settlement, and we will do the best we can to settle with you.
Councillor?
And that's that's great to hear. So having said that, would you be willing to withdraw your appeal to LPAT and have us deal with it here and let council and the public make the decisions?
Joanne?
Be willing to do that.
Councillor?
Sorry?
No, I said councillor.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but I'm just terribly disappointed. Fortunately, for the second public planning meeting in a row, because while there's some benefit tonight, there's no doubt, and I enjoy hearing the public's perspective. We're spinning our wheels here, and we've gotten all of us out on a Tuesday night. We've gotten the public out on a Tuesday night, knowing full well we are not the decision-making body. And I'm afraid that everything that was done tonight is really quite meaningless, because if the residents really want to make an impact, you have to do it again in front of a tougher body than what you have here. And that's truly unfortunate. Mr. Waters, you had mentioned that we're here tonight because of a previous council resolution that said for us to have another public planning meeting prior to the LPAT. And I read the resolution in the minutes, and it says to have another public planning meeting, but unless I missed something, it doesn't say prior to the LPAT meeting, because it really couldn't, because LPAT, it was appealed after the last public planning meeting. So why couldn't we have waited till after LPAT made their decision, or at least at a preliminary meeting, to or really, quite frankly, cancel this meeting, because I really can't even see the value to this.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're at a point in time that's important to bring forward the plan as it is today to the public for comment, because I would hate to get to a closed session with council and not have the public involved in a sort of a review of the plan as it sits today. I think the input we've heard today is very valuable and will be considered by both the town and the applicant to sort of deal with the comments that are raised today. So I find it helpful that we've brought it forward at this point. It's in a forced submission. It's nearing the end. I think we wanted to give LPAT the understanding that progress is being made on the file because the board or the LPAT now is very conscious of applications moving forward through the process. And to say that we haven't had any public consultation since basically 2016, I think now that will not be looked favorably upon the town. So I think that's the reason why we brought it forward today.
Councillor?
I would find it somewhat hypocritical if LPAT, had an issue with us not having a public planning meeting when it's really, quite frankly, they've taken away our right to make this decision. It just doesn't make sense to me. Listen, I'm all for public input, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to project a false hope to the public that this is going to be influential. I hope it is, and I hope the developer is listening, but it's really up to them to listen and make the changes, and it's up to the public to make a strong argument for what it is they want. I guess we're just a venue in a room and that discussion takes place, but it's terribly, terribly frustrating.
I'm not going to disagree with you, Councillor. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gallo. I think we're all feeling that same sentiment around the table and wish that we had a little bit more power around this table, so thank you. For me, I felt that it was a good learning of the chronological way that this has panned out from 2013, I believe, when it first came, so it was very helpful for me, but it's not very helpful for the residents if we can't do anything. But I really do hope that the developers are taking in some of the comments today, because I'm sure you want this to go as smoothly as possible, and it'll be more of a win-win situation for everybody. The question I did have, and I thought it was a really good point brought up by one of the delegates, Mr. Bridgeford, about the Japanese knotwood and how it is an invasive plant, and I was wondering if perhaps you could give me an answer on whether or not who is responsible if that gets into the wild, because it is a big problem.
I'll ask Mr. Waters, who would be responsible if the Japanese knotwood starts to invade into the development area?
My understanding through you, Mr. Mayor, is that it would be the Condo Corp that would have to be responsible for invasive species that have appeared, if they do appear over time.
Councillor?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess to Mr. Waters, if it's already been identified on the property and is seen as something that's encroaching or can be encroaching, should that not be something they should be addressing now before it becomes a problem?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, could you repeat the first part of the question? I didn't catch the initial.
If it's something, thank you. If it's something that we've already identified as a problem and it's seen encroaching or about to be encroaching, is that not something they should be taking care of now before it becomes a problem?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely. If that invasive species is there at the moment, it should be removed. And again, all the work that's being done within the creek is subject to LSRC approval. So any type of plantings or anything else will have to be subject to their approval.
Councillor?
And not include invasive species.
Thank you. Thank you. And while I think that's all great, and I don't want to get off course here, but just listening about the timelines and going through LPAT, this could take quite a long time. And I would really hate to see this we get completely out of control by the time that if we have the power to enforce that, I think we should at least take that power and enforce that before it becomes a problem, while we're still waiting for this process to go through. The second question I had, and I don't know, maybe it was answered and I missed it, but, and excuse me if I don't quite understand, because I know Councillor Humphreys was shaking her head. Yes, and I don't understand the private parkland area on the map and what the gross error is on the official plan and the parkland. If maybe through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Waters, you can clarify maybe a little bit about what that means and where that comes from?
Mr. Waters, can you clarify that?
For
what
sure,
Richard
Mr.
was
Mayor.
mentioning?
My understanding is the original mapping that was provided in the report was based on the first submission, and the updated mapping that was provided by the clerk is representative now of the submission that is before you. So it was an error on our part that we included the older mapping, and the newer mapping, which was circulated, it reflects the concept plan and the work done to date.
Councillor?
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify that this map, the secondary one, is the correct one then. There's no worry. Perfect. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I was going to ask the delegate the same question that Councillor Gallo asked with regards to LPAT and why they chose to go that route. It's always concerning when an application goes to LPAT. I know myself and Mayor Maracas and a number of our municipal colleagues across the province, you know, last term we advocated for significant changes to OMB. We feel then, and we still feel strongly now, that the people that are in the best position to determine how our community is built are those around this table, not at the province. And we felt that we should have a greater say in how our communities are built. In fact, we should have the final say, and that's what we advocated for last term. Unfortunately, the legislation is such now that it's gone back to the old rules with OMB, and the final say is with LPAT. And so they have the ability to overrule any bylaws, amendments, plans that we have. Whatever they say, we must comply with. We can argue till our heart's content, and I certainly hope all of the residents here will make an effort to attend the hearings and share, because we can't do it without you for these changes. Because historically, municipalities have not done well at OMB. Things like character, impact to community, other social economic factors, in my opinion, are not often considered by LPAT. They just look at it from a planning lens and determine whether or not it's good planning. So it's a challenge. And so, you know, I appreciate the willingness of them to work with staff and the community, but it always concerns me when it's before LPAT.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My colleagues asked quite a few of the important questions I was considering and thinking. The only other one I just like to comment on is, you know, out of the zoning requirements of permitted uses, out of 12, 9 are being proposed for exception. So I find that frustrating as well. I'm hearing that, you know, the appellant wants to work with the town and LPAT, but I'm not seeing that on the adjustments. You know, the height is a real big concern. The type of, yeah, we heard it from the residents. I don't want to belabor it, but I just hope that we can get, if the appellant really does want to work with us, to really come closer to official plan zoning requirements rather than having all these exceptions. It's just at a quick glance. Height is obviously the most important for us. And the only other question I have through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, are these comments going to be put forth to the LPAT or not?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, absolutely. We can summarize the results of the public meeting tonight at LPAT and advise the board on what was said and the concerns that were raised by the residents.
Councillor?
Well, that's good. I appreciate that. At least it's not a total waste. If we get some of our feedback, that would be positive. And I think just relative to one comment that was made, and it could be my error, I'll have to go back into the records, but there was a concern regarding trail connections and access to the property. If I remember correctly, this is 2016 now, so, but we talked about bridges to go across safely into the areas so that we could have a continuous trail connection. We discussed it at our Active Trails and Transportation Committee, and I believe we were going to work together to see if there was somehow that type of connectivity that we could restore or have worked through. So I'm going to dig into that because I know that there's protected areas, there's dangerous areas, but if we present a bridge with fencing, that should allow our residents to be able to continuously walk through the area that we have today, I believe, that exists regardless of the dangerous areas of the creek. So that's it for now. I think I have some other areas in terms of, I heard that there have been some contamination found, and this is why we're building these homes on platforms. We don't want to move the soil. It's better to keep it contained. I understand that, and that's probably why the height is being considered. Councillor Gill and I were speaking about that earlier. But still, if there's somewhere where one of the neighbors, residents, did mention if the houses that are street level can be designed a little bit, in a different manner, maybe a 2-story wider, and then behind a little bit higher where it isn't that much of an impact. We have a streetscape that is in tune with the neighborhood. I think it's very important. If there's some way that the developer would work with us, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you to Councillor Humphreys for asking some of my questions, important questions. To the proponent, could somebody speak a little bit more about the cut and fill and the increase in impermeable surfaces and where this storage tank is going to be, this water storage tank, and what other measures you're doing to maintain the water balance? Thanks.
Peter?
Okay, so it sounds like there's 3 technical questions there. First, on-site stormwater control. Second being the floodplain storage in the valley. And then third, water balance, which is groundwater related. So the first, on the topic of on-site stormwater control, the underground tank will be located underneath the amenity area. There's a triangular or pie-shaped space as part of the development proposal that will be used for just, I guess, neighborhood park land for the residents of the condo corporation. And underneath that is where we would locate the storage tank.
Can I just ask for clarification? I mean, we do have the term amenity area in all of our developments. Usually it refers to an area that the public can use, a common area that the public can use. In this case, the amenity area is going to be the compromised area, unless I'm wrong.
Peter?
By compromised, you mean the fact that there's an underground tank below it?
No, compromised by the fact that it's going to be fenced off and the public won't be able to use it?
So the amenity area that I'm referring to, where the tank is located, is actually embedded between the proposed townhouse blocks. It's not in the valley corridor. It's not on the east side of the valley.
Thank
it's
you.
actually embedded between the townhouse blocks. And if I don't have a copy of the draft plan or site plan in front of me here, but it's a pie-shaped location that was suitable for the underground storage.
Thank you. I don't think
Councillor?
it shows on our attachments, but thank you.
Councillor?
Can you show it?
Can we put that
Do
up?
you have the,
Thank you.
the site plan available?
Sorry, could you just point it out? Oh, okay.
Right here, between those 2 angular-shaped townhouse blocks.
Thank
so
you.
That's where the underground storage will be located.
Councillor?
Thank you. So that's what was private parkland area.
Correct.
Is it going to be a very large tank? And is it going to be very deep?
It's going to take up the entire footprint of that amenity area. We've maximized the size of that tank for stormwater control requirements. 300 cubic meters is about an average size for this size of development. And very deep, it's probably about 1 meter below surface.
Councillor?
And do you know how often it's going to be cleaned out?
Peter?
Maintenance of the underground tank, there is a secondary water quality device that's being proposed in conjunction with the underground storage for the physical removal of sediments, called an oil grit separator or a jellyfish unit is one of the trademark names, but that takes care of any sediment oil grit that is collected on the road runoff and that gets its pre-treatment prior to entering the tank. So the tank shouldn't require very frequent clean out. It's not expected to be silted up or over time, but the condo corporation will be responsible for any maintenance of it, maybe every 5 or 10 years or so.
Thank you. And so there were, you said there were 3 technical questions.
There were 3 parts to it, right. So the first was the on-site stormwater management, which we just discussed with the tank. The second was the floodplain storage. And I think you just wanted some, I guess, clarification of the proposed cut and fill activity. So rather than characterizing the fill activity as being a berm, it's really flattening out of the tableland or the current sloped land to create a bit of tableland to support the proposed development townhouse blocks. The compensating cut that would be excavated would occur essentially adjacent to those townhouse areas. It won't be excavated out from the valley itself. It won't be excavated from the east side of the valley, which remains untouched. It will be excavated along the, call it the east edge of the townhouse blocks, and it'll be excavated in a volume equal to the same volume of fill that's being placed in the floodplain.
Councillor?
Thank you. I don't think this part's your jurisdiction, but that's where there's going to be a height challenge. I mean, the height is going to be higher than the residents would like. So is there any way to flatten that out more?
Peter?
No. I guess the height of fill that's being proposed has kind of two measures to it, or 2 benefits to it. One is to create a flatter area for development to be situated on the property, and the second is also to cap the contaminated soils. And that really wasn't discussed too much in detail today about the capping of the contaminated soils. And that is primary reason why at least a meter of fill above the existing ground is being proposed.
Councillor?
Thank you. And there was a third one, did you say?
The third part, you had a question about water balance. Now, water balance is call it a regeneration of groundwater as a result through infiltration of rainwater on site. So one of the LSRCA's requirements is that you meet the pre-development water balance targets. And so as part of our work, we've demonstrated to them in our functional servicing report that post-development, the same amount of rainwater will be able to enter the ground as it does today.
My concern is that with the extra development and the slab, that more water is going to run off into the creek, and it's already been suggested that we want to make sure that creek is stabilized and not to cause pollution upstream. So I don't know if you're the appropriate person to answer that. But so is the stormwater going to be contained so that it will not flood into the creek and go into the creek and cause flooding and upstream issues?
Peter?
The floodplain analysis we completed demonstrates that in a post-development condition, the flood condition on this property improves compared to where it is today, meaning that the flood elevation will be lower than where it is now, and the conveyance ability through the site will be improved, primarily as a result of removal of the culvert. So overall, the floodplain impacts are being mitigated, and the conditions are actually being improved.
So with respect to the resident who showed us the pictures of the flooding in his backyard, he actually lives across the street and slightly to the east. Is this going to help him?
Peter?
I'm not sure exactly where that resident lives, but if it's somewhere in the vicinity, direct vicinity of this, opposite this area.
He lives next to the creek.
Next to the creek, then yes, there should be a marginal benefit in terms of lowering of the floodplain on his property.
Would you like to define marginal?
I don't know the exact depth of floodplain that's going to be reduced by offhand.
Councillor?
Thank you. I have a really big concern, and I'm hoping you're going to tell me it's unfounded, or somebody over there is going to tell me it's unfounded. Mm-hmm. When you build on slab and then you've got the weight of the house on top of that, is that going to cause compression in the soil and then in the water that's going to potentially cause the contamination in this area to be spread? To be spread into the water table?
Peter?
I'm not the expert on the migration of contaminants through soils, but I can say that, you know, a good majority of the site has already exhibited and been under pressure as a result of the former building that was on the property. In addition to the new buildings that are being proposed, the ground would normally have to be compacted to at least 98% anyway in order to support house construction on top of it. So the effort of compacting the soils in order to build houses would likely be less than the weight of the new houses above them.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'm just looking at where the brownfield actually is. Well, I'm hoping that I will be able to get an answer from the consultant on that with respect to, perhaps not now, but in the future with respect to that extra weight. The building was more to the left of this development. The development is going to be in a different place than the building. So, no, it's not going to be in a different place than the building. It looks like that to me. It's certainly going to cover more of the site than the building, it looks to me. So I'd like just an assurance at some point in the future that the development is not going to cause any pressure on the contaminants going into the water table.
I believe we can get a professional opinion on that.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thanks to Councillor Gilland about the invasive knotweed. When Carly was up, she said, or it was said, that the certificate of proper use and the whole plan is overseen by the person who prepares the document. And then we're also going to have an expert hired to oversee that all of the conditions are met. Am I right on that?
Yes, it would be the condominium corporation that hires the qualified person, the QP. The QP who's been doing the work is Carly at EXP. And then the whole process, it all has to be documented. And the certificate of property use is controlled by the Ministry of Environment and Conservation. So that instrument is what the MECP uses to enforce that the condominium corporation does what's in the risk management plan.
Thank you. Councillor?
So it's not going to be Carly, or it could be Carly.
Carly is the qualified person, the QP, who does the inspections, does the certifications, says that the risk management measures are there, can inspect the fence or oversee people inspecting the fences, the caps, all of the risk management measures that are in the plan. But then that reporting and documentation of it can be inspected by the ministry, and they control it through that CPU.
Councillor,
I'm over time.
I've allowed you to go a lot over because I didn't mind, but I'll go to Councillor Kim and then we can come back to you for a second time. Thank you. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was along the lines of the certificate of property use. So it seems like through this process that through the inputs of LSRCA, the town, and the province, the certificate of property use is created. And so it's great that we have time like tonight and previous public planning meetings where residents can weigh in, and they can certainly weigh in at LPAT. But my question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the consultant or to Mr. Waters is there a chance that if the certificate of property use leaves out one or two certain details that could have been missed because in any kind of sensitive item or issue, while one or two great mitigation ideas could be missed. Is it pretty static and sidewalled so that no new inputs can go in, or if something is identified, can it be implemented or incorporated into the certificate of property use after it's been mandated?
There's a few things that happen before the certificate of property use is issued. I talk about the risk management measures and the risk management plan. They're reviewed by the ministry and are incorporated into it. If I could backtrack some with the public that's here in the comments, they go into our risk assessment and they're reviewed by the Ministry of Environment. So I would say that the input is useful at this meeting for the environmental aspects of the risk assessment. Then finally, before the certificate of property use is issued, it goes on the Environmental Bill of Rights registry. So public comments can be considered by the ministry, and I'm sure that the ministry would look at town comments as well. And those comments can be made through the EBR, and then they would be addressed as required before the CPU is issued by the ministry. So there is opportunity to provide input into the CPU.
Councillor?
Okay. And lastly, I guess my concern is, once, ideally, if every stakeholder's concerns are answered, my concern would be post-development. Once the developer's gone, once the condominium corporation is in place, will it work the way it should? If there's a mitigation or a maintenance issue regarding some sensitive items, is it going to be like we have in our current bylaw system, going to be complaint-based, and someone has to complain about something in order for the condo corp to act? And if they don't act, I'm sure there's laws in place to ensure that they are that the certificate of property use is going to be implemented by the qualified person who's going to be looking after the condo corp. For you to consultant.
Get the applicant to come up.
Yeah, so this is something that we've engaged with the MECP on, the ministry as well, given the specific common elements condominium. So I think Joanne touched on it before. There's going to be a CPU that will be the responsibility of the site owners, which will include the condo board and the parcels of tied land owners. So restrictive covenants are going to be used to make sure that the elements of the CPU can be enforced. On the common elements, there's going to be a number of different monitoring programs, as well as on the parcels of tied land. Ultimately, the ministry has the authority to enforce anything on the CPU, should there be any specific concerns. But basically, the condominium documents are going to be written in a way that the CPU will be fully complied with. And as I've said, we've discussed this with the ministry. It's going to be something that the CPU gets written in a way that the ministry is satisfied as well, that it will be carried out appropriately.
Yeah.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you. With respect to what happens if some kids climb over the fence and get into the contaminated area? Well, I'd like an answer to that, just generally what you think. But with respect to contravention in general of going into the area, what are the consequences? Are there any consequences?
Councillor, are you curious who would be liable for that?
Yeah, who would be monitoring it and who would be liable?
Mr. Waters, did you want to take a stab at that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I assume it would be the condo corp that will take responsibility for the control and maintenance and policing of the area that's fenced off.
Councillor?
Thank you. So, so it won't be the developer's responsibility anymore. It'll just go to the condo corp. Could somebody just show me where the fence land is going to be? I know it's going to be on the boundary, but where in the subdivision it's going to be?
Can we get that map up? And thank you.
The site boundary along here, and then come up behind the homes to protect these lands, and then also the sloped lands that have a lot of mature trees here and vegetation, those will be fenced as well.
So basically wherever there isn't residential. Thank you. Thank you. And I think would be to Joanne. Joanne said the environmental protection areas are being refined, which the OP says needs to occur. I don't understand that.
Joanne?
It's been a long time since I practiced land use planning, but your OP designates this a brownfield remediation. The staff report sets out the policies that are applicable here, and it's a refinement of the EP area and a redevelopment of the developable area and a rezoning. It's a brownfield remediation we're doing here.
So
under
thank
under
you.
the
So
official
this,
plan.
so what you were saying actually falls somewhere in the OP under.
Yes, it does.
What we have to do with brownfields.
Yes, it does.
And
It meets the intent of the policy.
Councillor?
thank you. And okay, thank you very much.
That's it? Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gallo, second time.
Just a question on the resolutions before us and the next steps, because it doesn't speak to another meeting. So I guess as a result, as you mentioned before, of what happens at LPAT, if there is some type of settlement, is that the next step? Either it goes to a full-blown event, or there's a settlement that comes back to us.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our intention is to continue to work with the applicant to resolve the issues that you've heard tonight and to bring forward a settlement for council's consideration.
So is that up to LPAT to is that prior to going to the pre-conference?
Through Mr. Mayor, the March 27th pre-hearing is intended to determine where the application is in the process and if both sides are working towards a settlement. We will advise the LPAT of that, and we will bring forward likely the LPAT will set another hearing date for settlement, given what is reported to them, and then there likely would not be another public planning meeting schedule unless you could direct us to do that. If this does go to a hearing, the LPAT could be requested to hold a evening session for a public meetings type of meeting.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if it goes to a settlement, let's say we come up with a settlement, comes to council makes a decision, and then what? My concern is how is the public involved in that scenario?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the settlement is in closed session, and the comments would be reported, the recognition reported in public. The question becomes, can something be brought forward in a public forum on the settlement prior to it going to closed session? And I don't have an answer for you at the moment on that.
Councillor?
Okay, I guess we'll wait and see. That is, my concern is that we go through this process and council makes a resolution, and I guess somehow it gets dispersed amongst the public on what the final decision is made. If we do settle, or it goes to a hearing in which the public would have full access to and be able to comment on. So I guess we'll see how it goes.
And the only thing I would add, Councillor, is that even though we would be going to closed session, the agenda would state that it's 45 Tyler that we were discussing. And so I would assume that, yeah, there'd be no details, but when we report out a closed session, the public would be here to hear our vote. I think everyone would have a sense of what we're doing and what we're voting on, and they would see whether we would be saying yay or nay to that direction. And then obviously if we said nay, it would go to a full-blown hearing at that point. So any other comments or questions? So I'm going to go on a little rant about the process, obviously. You know, it was mentioned about that this was appealed in 2017. You know, when you look back at 2017, the changes that we achieved to the OMB, the reason why this was appealed is because most applicants were running and appealing because they weren't sure of what was going to happen with the new rules coming in. There was concern that now, finally, councils would have a stronger say in how we deal with applications that come before our councils. And so that's why you had a rush of appeals going to the board at that time. Unfortunately, the new provincial government came in, changed those rules. They brought back de novo hearings, which basically took away our power, not necessarily our power, we still have a say, but at the end of the day, once it leaves our hands and the appeal process comes in, our decision can be overturned, whereas the changes that we fought for and did get, that wasn't going to happen. And so we end up in this position where ROP is not worth the paper that it's written on, and that's the way I feel, and I know many other elected officials around the province feel the same way. You know, it's as mentioned, you know, there's a certain character to our community, there's a uniqueness to it, and this is what we fought for, so we can have that say. If it doesn't meet our OP, in this instance, we're talking about a height that's 11.5. We fought through stable neighborhood protections to look at getting that down to the 9-meter mark, and here we have something that could end up with 11.5. But yet we have no say, because it's been appealed. And LPAT is going to look at it from a provincial level, and Councillor Thompson, you're correct. They're going to look at that from a provincial planning, and when you look at that provincial policy, you see that it talks about infill housing and intensification, and so they're going to look at it from that perspective, and they're going to say, this fits that policy, and therefore we're going to approve it because it's good planning. But it doesn't meet the town of Aurora's policy. It doesn't meet our OP. It doesn't meet what we want in our community, and that's the problem. And until changes are made to the appeal process, and until the provincial government listens to the elected officials in the municipalities, this is what's going to happen time and time again. And so we need to fight to make those changes, and until those changes happen, this is what we're going to be stuck with. It's unfortunate. We at this table will fight as hard as we can every day, every application that comes in here, to make sure that it's what this town wants. But until that appeal process is changed, this is what we're stuck with. So we all need to go to the Premier, go to our MPPs, and tell them this needs to be changed now. I told you it was going to be a bit of a rant. So, Council, I will call the vote. Yes, Councillor? Yeah, we were doing all there. We did it all there. I'm calling the vote. Yeah, that carries. So for all of you that are here, just to let you know, come out. I suggest you come out, I think, March 27th. Come here. It will be in this chambers. Do we know what time it is at?
Usually 10 o'clock.
10 a.m. Come here. You'll be able to hear the pre-hearing conference and what happens. You'll also be able to be put forward if you want to be a participant or not, and you'll be able to have a say at that time. Okay, so I encourage everyone to come out. Council, we will actually take our health break at this point since we got 5 minutes to it, so. All right, council, we are back. Wow, the chambers is empty now. I guess no one wants to talk about backyard swim schools? No? Okay. Item number 2. Mr. Waters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a town-initiated official plan amendment, and Ana Henriquez, our senior planner, will be making a presentation on the proposal at this point in time.
Thank you.
Good evening, once again, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and I guess there's nobody from the public. The purpose of my presentation tonight is to provide you with some information on a proposed town-initiated official plan amendment pertaining to backyard swim schools as home occupations. So to begin my presentation, I will go over some background information just to provide some context. Next, I will outline staff's recommended approach for considering backyard swim schools as a permitted home occupation use. And a key component of that includes a proposed town official plan amendment, which is the subject of tonight's tonight's public planning meeting. And lastly, I will conclude my presentation by outlining next steps. So just to provide some context as to why we're here tonight, on February 26, 2019, Council directed staff through a resolution to report back regarding potential zoning bylaw amendments to amend the home occupation provisions specifically to permit backyard swim schools as a home occupation use. And I'd also like to note that subsequent to that February 2019 council resolution, staff did report back to GC in December 2019 with a proposed recommended approach, and that approach was outlined in a report, and it is consistent with what I'll be presenting this evening. So just very quickly, sorry, I forgot. Just very quickly, with respect to the existing policy framework, both at the provincial level and the regional level, there are a number of policies and plans that provide policy direction, encouraging good planning and protecting matters of provincial interest. And generally, at a very high level, this policy direction encourages the efficient use of land, buildings, and infrastructure, and also the development of complete communities that provide a variety of housing options, employment opportunities, services and amenities for residents, while also preserving and enhancing our natural environment. So within the context of home occupations and this policy framework, home occupations certainly do support the policy direction, specifically by utilizing existing housing stock for local employment opportunities and supporting the development of complete communities by providing local services and employment opportunities in close proximity to residents. So now at the local level and the policy framework with the town's official plan, the official plan does support home occupations, specifically section 6.13 permits home occupations in single and semi-detached dwellings in residential areas. The home occupations are permitted subject to specific criteria as outlined on the slide before you. I'll just quickly go through those. So the use must be carried out entirely within a dwelling unit. The use must be secondary to the primary use of the property as it relates to the GFA. The use must be undertaken by someone who is a principal resident of the dwelling. No outdoor storage is permitted. And the use shall not adversely impact the surrounding area with respect to traffic generation, hours of operation, and parking. When it comes to our the town's zoning bylaw, a home occupation is a defined term. The definition is listed on that slide there for you. And it's really quite a simple definition. It, just to summarize it, it means a home occupation means an occupation that is carried out by a person residing in a dwelling, and then the definition goes on to provide examples, specific examples of the different types of home occupations, such as pet grooming, a private home, daycare, etc. So similar to the official plan, the town zoning bylaw permits home occupations in residential zones, again, specific to regulations, primarily implementing the official plan policies and building upon those policies. And I just like to note that the purpose of these regulations are primarily to mitigate or minimize any potential impacts on the surrounding area while helping to maintain the residential character of the neighborhood. So when looking at the specific zoning standards, there it is again. The use must be conducted entirely within a dwelling or accessory building. No mechanical equipment is permitted. No more than one resident employee. The use must be clearly secondary to the main primary use of the building and not change the residential character of a dwelling unit. There is a maximum with respect to GFA, 25% of the total GFA devoted to the home occupation, up to a maximum of 45 square meters. And when we're looking at a dwelling unit that contains a secondary suite, only one home occupation is permitted. I'd also like to point out that the zoning bylaw parking standards do also include for parking requirements specific to home occupation uses. Just to summarize, based on the current official plan and zoning bylaw regulations, home occupations are not permitted, primarily due to the nature of the use and the fact that it's carried out primarily outdoors and not within a dwelling unit or an accessory building. So to address that, staff is recommending an approach. It's a two-step approach to consider backyard swim schools as a permitted home occupation use. The first step of the approach is the subject of this evening's meeting, which is the town-initiated official plan amendment. The second step to the approach be tackling or looking at the zoning permission side of it, and staff is recommending that the use be considered on a site-specific basis through a committee of adjustment application for a minor variance. We'll discuss that further in an upcoming slide. So with respect to the town-initiated official plan amendment, staff are proposing some minor changes, again, to provide and namely policies for backyard swim schools. Specifically, staff is recommending a policy that says that backyard swim schools may be considered as a home occupation use, even though they are primarily conducted outdoors. Staff is also recommending an amendment with respect to the outdoor storage policy. Again, just to provide a little bit of flexibility, we understand that with backyard swim schools or maybe pool equipment or other kind of outdoor storage related to lessons, what do you call those, paddle boards, or that need to be stored. So we just want to be sure that we're accommodating for that if required. So I just wanted to clarify that all other provisions or policies in the official plan relating to home occupations, as I previously mentioned, so section 6.13 would still apply with this amendment. We're only proposing to amend those two policies. And again, just specific to backyard swim schools. No other home occupation that is conducted outdoors. The proposed amendment, staff is recommending that it apply to single and semi-detached dwellings where home occupations are currently permitted in the town, except where there is a conflict with the Oak Ridges Moraine Plan. So the Oak Ridges, the ORMCP permits home occupations in natural core, natural linkage, and countryside areas, provided they are located, again, within a dwelling unit or an accessory building. So staff is not recommending any changes to that, as we don't have the ability to, we have the ability to be more restrictive with the ORMCP, but not more permissive. And so that gets me to the second part of our approach. So it doesn't really have to do with this meeting. There is no statutory public meeting requirement. Staff is recommending, should council approve the proposed official plan amendment, that moving forward, backyard swim schools be permitted as, or be considered as a permitted home occupation use on a site-specific basis through a minor variance application to the Committee of Adjustment. Before I get into any further detail on that, I just wanted to take some time to kind of touch on why staff is not recommending a zoning bylaw amendment to provide a blanket or as-of-right permission for backyard swim schools as a home occupation. So there's, I guess, two main reasons. The first one being that there are some concerns that the introduction of a blanket permission may set a precedent for other outdoor and potentially more intensive home occupation uses in residential areas. And the second reason being that staff have concerns that the zoning standards, and again, applying a blanket permission for backyard swim schools as a home occupation, even with the inclusion of regulations and standards, that it may not adequately address potential negative impacts. Again, depending on the specific area and site characteristics, as you can appreciate, local circumstances and context varies throughout the town. So in order to adequately and best mitigate any potential negative impacts, staff recommend that the use be considered on a site-specific basis. So through the minor variance application approach, staff feel that this approach strikes the balance between supporting local home businesses while also supporting area residents who may be impacted by such a use. And I'd just like to note that based on our review, primary impacts relate to noise, traffic, and parking. So through this approach, an application for a minor variance would be submitted to the Committee of Adjustment to essentially permit backyard swim school as a home occupation, whereas the bylaw requires that the home occupation must be conducted indoors. Application would be filed and it would be circulated to staff for review, as well as any applicable external agencies. With this approach, the application would be subject to the 4 tests in the Planning Act and would have to demonstrate how they comply with the 4 tests. So the 4 tests being that the minor variance meets the general intent of the official plan, which it will should council approve the official plan amendment, that the minor variance meet the general intent of the zoning bylaw, that the minor variance is considered appropriate, desirable for the appropriate development of the land and buildings, and that the minor variance is considered minor in it's minor in nature. So that would be reviewed by planning staff. Staff would circulate the application. Other commenting agencies and staff would have the opportunity to consider any issues or concerns that they have and recommend any conditions of approval to the committee. And another benefit of this approach is that there would be notification provided to surrounding property owners, again on a site-specific basis. So it's an opportunity for property owners to attend the hearing or provide a written submission outlining their concerns, and like I said, the Committee of Adjustment has the ability to impose conditions to address any concerns either by staff or at the public hearing. So with respect to next steps, planning staff will be working with bylaw enforcement, just ironing out the details on a future process to ensure pool safety as it relates to this new approach. So we've had some preliminary discussions about pool enclosure permits and ensuring that they're obtained, if should committee approve a backyard swim school as a home occupation, and also perhaps looking at requiring re-inspection every year. Staff are also looking to work with community services staff to educate backyard swim school operators on safety measures as it relates to vulnerable populations such as children and the elderly. And staff will address any comments received at tonight's meeting as appropriate prior to bringing forward a final OPA to General Committee and Council for consideration in the spring of this year. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any members of the public? I would like, nope. I know. I'm just asking because I have to ask. So I will close the public portion of the meeting. Council, we'll just wrap it all in the report and questions, obviously, because we don't have an applicant here. This is a staff-driven and council-driven policy that's come forward. So we will, actually, would someone like to put the recommendation on the floor? Councillor Kim, seconded by Councillor Gilliland. Councillor Gallo, you're up.
Thank you. Just reading the resolution, so it's just basically going to come back to a general committee. So we're not necessarily deciding tonight whether we go with kind of a letting people do it without going to the committee of adjustment through a minor variance. We're not deciding that tonight. It's an option, but it's not necessarily being decided tonight. Is that?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. We are just asking to proceed to GC with a recommendation report.
Okay, and just some questions on that. So if someone did want to do this, they would put in an application as a minor variance, and it would go through the typical committee of adjustment process. Just two things, timing and cost.
Enriquez? Did I say it right? It's Enriquez, right? Is that?
It's good enough, thank you.
That's good. Well, well, let me know if it's.
I've heard worse, so that's
okay.
Actually quite good. Through you, Mr. Mayor, with respect to timing, once staff receives a complete application, the Act requires that it be heard within 30 days. And the second part of your question with respect to the fees, the Planning Act also provides the Committee of Adjustment with the ability to reduce or waive fees. That I believe would have to be a request from the applicant. I don't think staff would recommend that. It would be a request for the committee to consider.
Councillor, do we know the amount that it would cost someone typically? Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
The cost for a C of A application is $2,038.
Councillor?
I'm just trying to play this in my head in terms of what the drawback is if we allow it not going through the committee of adjustment, and every pool has certain regulations. Anyone who has a pool has to fulfill certain regulations. I'm just not convinced that that's the right approach, because I believe there are even other bylaws in place. Let's say something, gets too rowdy, or there are issues with a particular home that is doing this service. I suspect there are other bylaws that would come into play. I just don't want to make it too onerous for someone to do this. At the same time, it needs to be safe and controlled and all of that, and not necessarily have any additional liability on the town to officially allow this to happen. It's happening right now. So I'm moving towards allowing it, but not necessarily going through the committee adjustment process. Have we encountered any issues in the past that staff have identified, and that's why we're putting this additional layer to go to the committee adjustment? Just trying to better understand what staff's position on it.
Mr. Waters?
Through Mr. Mayor, as Ms. Enriquez had identified in the presentation, we don't believe a blanket permission or an as-of-right permission is appropriate because of the fact that there may be instances where a backyard swimming pool, swimming school is not appropriate, given its location, maybe to an open space feature, or maybe there's parking issues, there's on the street or what have you. So we feel that, and it's be difficult to control if you have that as a right permission. I think we're talking about public health and safety here. So from our perspective, we believe the best approach is to go through the committee of adjustment so we can control and customize the conditions for that particular operation.
Councillor?
And I don't disagree, because public health obviously is super important. I'm just wondering if there are other ways of doing it through either a licensing, and I agree with that. If we go through the process of allowing it throughout the town, there should be some type of communication to us that we know it's happening in a particular location through licensing or some other approach. I'm just worried it's going to be so onerous and expensive that, just doesn't sit well with me to do that. And just how did this come about? What was the impetus to actually do this? Clearly, it's been happening.
Notice motion.
Oh, I see. So, and was it because we found issues or?
So, Councillor, I'll just give you a little bit of background, and for everyone, just in case they forgot. So what occurred was there were some concerns that came forward and brought forward to me that we actually don't allow this. And so if there is a complaint, we actually have to go in and stop if there's a backyard school, swimming school happening. And the thing is that the region actually encourages this, and they actually give out grants for this. And so what was happening is that because we said that, you know what, we would allow it, but we, because it's so complicated to make the OP change and everything, that we will allow it, but it's not really allowed. The problem was with that philosophy is that the residents that were doing this were not allowed to receive the grant from the region. The region said because the municipality does not actually allow it, we cannot give you the grant, and so they were missing out on that. And we all know that these are students that are doing this, and so for them to miss out on that grant, we're talking like $1,000. That's a lot of money for them to be able to help out with doing this. And so that's where this came out of, for us to officially allow it. Something that we already were allowing, it just wasn't in the books.
And now I recall your notice of motion. Do we know what other municipalities do in terms of most others? Do they go through a minor variance process or a licensing or?
Enriquez, did you want to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did review what other municipalities are doing across Southern Ontario, and can report that the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, was just recently considering this very issue. I'm not sure what the outcome is. I believe they're still going through that process, and based on the research that was done, the only municipality within Southern Ontario that permits backyard swim schools as of right, I believe, is the St. Catharines, and most municipalities only permit home occupations provided they're conducted indoors.
And sorry, just the process, is it a committee of adjustment? Do we know if it's a committee of adjustment or as of right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, presumably if it's not permitted in the zoning bylaw, and a property owner would have the ability to apply for a minor variance should they wish to pursue that.
So as it stands right now, someone could, regardless of this, go to the committee of adjustment and ask to do it, and they could get it?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, they could, but as I mentioned in my presentation, they would have to demonstrate how they satisfy the 4 tests of the Planning Act, the one test being that it meet the general intent of the official plan. With the official plan as it currently sits, home occupations are only permitted indoors.
So if we through this process amend the official plan, I guess it goes hand in hand in terms of also deciding whether it's as a right or going to the C of A. I'm interested in hearing others. I'm you know, of the view that we don't make it too restrictive, and I believe there are other bylaws that would play if there are issues, and I suspect if there are issues, we would have the means to either shut them down because it's not appropriate or other ways. I'm just a little hesitant to put too many roadblocks on it because I think it's a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gilliland.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's a lot more for us to learn, and I agree that I don't want to make it onerous. And let's face it, we did mention a lot of it as students that are doing this to make a few dollars to get themselves through university and so forth. So $2,000 does sound like a lot of money to go through a process like that. But regardless, if that was a road that we ended up going down, I guess my question would be, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters, does this mean if someone went through the committee adjustment and say they were approved and they sold their house, does that zoning then move along with the next homeowner?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that zoning would remain with the subject property, yes.
Thank you. And I guess the question would be, is there a way to issue a permit as opposed to committee adjustment? Would that be a solution, that's something that we could put together that would kind of allow the process of running a school as opposed to the committee adjustment?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have not explored the licensing aspect of this. And I can't really comment on that. We were looking from a land use planning perspective, but I mean, there is an opportunity, I assume, to license it. You don't have business licenses here is what I understand, but that could be an option that could be explored in addition to going through a committee of adjustment process. If you so direct us to do that.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
I'm hoping we can find a line between, onerous financial and the committee of adjustment, because I really like the idea of it going to the committee and them deciding on a site-specific basis what the hours should be, how many people could be employed, because it's definitely going to affect the neighbors, and most likely it's going to affect the neighbors with respect to noise. And we've seen from past conversations at the table that it's really hard for bylaw to get to all of the noise complaints and enforce it. So I do like the idea of it going to the committee of adjustment. The other thing is, I think it sends the money does send a strong message about the safety, that you just can't decide to do this. You really need to think through it. It's going to cost you money, and it's going to cost you money because Aurora thinks it's a pretty serious use of your pool. The other thing, and we always get this with parking, it says in our bylaw right now with respect to home occupations, there are parking restrictions, and I think it says something about all of the cars attending for the business purpose have to be accommodated on the driveway. I can't find in here what the parking restriction is, but there is some sort of parking restriction so that the neighbors are not inconvenienced by too many cars.
Enriquez?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of that specific provision. I do know that for home occupations, one parking space is required for every 25 square meters of GFA.
Oh.
I'm not aware of that provision that you're
So
mentioning.
there are restrictions that would limit the size of the building by the size of the business.
That's correct.
Councillor?
And the other thing, right now in the official plan under home occupations, it says the property is the principal residence of the person carrying out the home occupation. So if we're talking about students could be living in the home, but somebody wouldn't be able to hire somebody to teach unless they were living in the home?
Enriquez?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the official plan doesn't contain policies with respect to employees of a home occupation. However, our zoning bylaw does limit it to a maximum of one employee who's a non-resident.
Oh, right. Thank you. I did see that. So you can hire one person who doesn't live in
That's
the
correct.
home. Thank you very much. I think I've said everything I need to say on this.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I understand the value of going through the committee of adjustment process to, impose some conditions and restrictions around the business. I guess my question is can one of those conditions be sort of annual inspections to make sure that, obviously the pool's in good repair, good condition, that some of those initial conditions, and if so, would that fall on bylaw to do it, or who would necessarily be tasked with that?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be a collaboration at the beginning of the process to work with bylaw, so they would do a pool enclosure inspection, and I believe that's about $100. My understanding is we would waive that $100 fee. And then on an annual basis, they would be required as a condition in the minor variance to have that pool inspection undertaken.
Councillor?
Okay, and then my second question, really just about the process, but I assume that to get a committee of adjustment application in front, you have to put the money up front initially, right?
Enriquez?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
So they would put up the $2,300 or whatever, and then make that request for the committee to reduce it and then get a refund, so to speak.
They can make the request to reduce or waive the fee. And I just wanted to add to Mr. Waters' comment with respect to the conditions. So whatever conditions and terms that the committee imposes, the Act allows the municipality to require the property owner to enter into an agreement. So, that will certainly help address any potential concerns and make sure that they're being adhered to.
Sure. I just share some of the concerns that I've heard around the table. I mean, traditionally it's been my experience that, yes, they're university kids or high school kids doing this. There's usually a limit to the years that they do it. And so even if you spread the $2,300 over a 4 or 5 year period, it is a good chunk of change. There's no guarantee that the committee will reduce it. And so I have some concerns. I like the process with committee adjustment in terms of kind of regulating it, although, it can be a lengthy process, I guess. But I don't know if there's some way that we could, is there a way that we could kind of, I guess, promote the fact that we would waive the fees, or is that always going to be at the discretion of the committee?
Who wants that one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we could certainly promote that. It may open up the door for others to make
I'm
those
just thinking
same
you
requests,
promote it that
which
if
is
it really is a student-run school, be it a university student or a high
Sure.
school student, that there would, be an understanding that there would be a reduced rate.
I think we could accommodate that request.
Thank you.
Well, I think Mr. Waters is saying they'll put that in that report when they come back to GC. They'll take that as a comment in consideration. Okay. Councillor Humphreys.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I like the process. I think it's something that is valuable, but I'm just concerned that the intent here is the type of individual that normally do swimming lessons are young people, young entrepreneurs that are trying to make money, high school students, university, and I just feel that fee is going to deter them. And if there's any way we can streamline this specific type of home employee role, because we can explain to the public that this again is usually temporary, short-term as teachers, and it's a great job. Like, it's a great job for kids, and it's a great job for parents to be able to bring kids to a house and either stay there for half an hour or leave and pick them up. And it's just a great service for all of us. So I'm just concerned about the money, and I don't know if there's any way we could go back and figure this out. I love the permitting process, but I guess that could be a whole different ballgame as well. But if there's anything we can do to help with the costs up front without being detrimental to others. Just a quick question to you, Mr. Mayor. Are like home, hairdresser and doctors, do they go through the committee of adjustment process as well?
Mr. Waters, would this open the door for that, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, they would not go through that process, provided they meet all the other zoning bylaw regulations, but based on your description of a hairdresser, it's primarily conducted inside a dwelling unit, so they would just have to comply with all the other regulations that limit the GFA and parking and all those other things.
Right, so there you go, there you go. So you have through you, Mr. Mayor, you have an employee that probably generates a lot more money and more consistently inside. And these young kids are going to have to follow the process. It's a tough thing to swallow. I'm going to look forward to hearing more from it when it comes back. I'm not sure I'm 100% for this. I just don't want to hurt the kids in the long run. That's in terms of the money up front, right? If there's another way to do it, that'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Kim for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Kim. Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to address the councillor's submission, we'll take a look at the fee bylaw and see if we can make some adjustments to it to recognize that it is, students, we just don't want to get somebody who does this full time to sort of take advantage of that. So we may put some criteria around that qualification, but we'll definitely look at providing some relief to the fee, but we'll have to look into it and report back.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you. I think from a land use and planning perspective, I didn't really consider what this had to do with land use and planning, but then when you look at more in detail about it in terms of swimming pool, it does make total sense. When you see also in the past we've dealt with people working in their garages, and then certainly noise bylaw comes into play. But certainly we do need to regulate, what happens outside of your private abode. I think my two main concern is one, as everyone outlined, is the fee. If there's, by the time this comes back to GC, if you can provide us some options regarding the fee. The second option is, the second concern that I have is just the timelines, because if it's mainly students that are going to utilize the backyard pools, it's just temporary for 3-4 months. They need to have their approvals in an expeditious manner. So I'm not sure how many items that the COA deals with on a regular basis, but if you were to get 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 or a dozen of these requests, it may not get into that COA meeting that month. So if we can, come back with in terms of how that's going to work out, so that these students or others who are doing this just for the short summer season, that they're not delayed or prevented from doing what they need to do, so that we can kind of make this expeditious.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you. And following on that, this would be time sensitive because it'll be hopefully summer soon. How soon can you bring this back to us?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we hope to report back to you before the end of April, hopefully.
I think that would be good. That would be good timing. Could just be clarified that they can enter something I didn't get, enter into an agreement with the town? Is this post C of A?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. So if deemed necessary as a condition of the approval and to address any of the conditions or terms imposed by the committee, the municipality, the town has the ability to require that the owner enter into an agreement with the town.
I think that would really help with our noise bylaw. Our bylaw officers are really on overload with that. The other thing is, and I agree with streamlining and decreasing the fee where appropriate, but we need to emphasize the safety issue. So could we limit the number of students per teacher? Could we have a request for some sort of qualification from the instructors?
Enriquez?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those are all excellent points, and absolutely, each staff can recommend those as conditions to the committee if deemed necessary, and as always, the committee has the ability to impose any conditions that they deem appropriate.
Thank you very much.
That's it, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Humphrey, second time.
Mr. Mayor, just two quick things. One, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but is there a way that staff can do like a sort of a staff delegation or staff authority, therefore bypassing COA and maybe having this agreement between the town and the resident? I don't know. Just thought I'd throw it out there. There's no reason to answer. I just thought if there's something that you can just do directly, just an agreement.
Enriquez?
And the other,
Did you
sorry.
want that answered?
Oh, sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry,
breaks all
just
the
before I
rules?
forget. So to answer your question, staff does not have the ability to provide relief to the zoning bylaw, only the Committee of Adjustment. However, I believe our director has delegated authority to execute
That's what I was thinking,
agreements.
delegated authority.
I can double check, but I'm pretty certain he does. So that would help.
Maybe we can get that for when it comes to GC.
That's what I was thinking, is if there's that delegated authority, and maybe that will help with the costs and.
I can think of one person to my left that might not agree with delegated
I know,
authority.
I'm looking at him sort of, but, anyway.
And I just throwing it out there. I think.
And just the other thing is, if we get into, and I probably don't want to talk about it too much longer here, I'm sure we'll come back, but when you talked about, ensuring they have the proper qualifications to be a swim instructor and safety, do we start taking on any kind of liability? And I don't think I want to do that. This is up to them and their business to take that liability on, and I don't want us to have to get in there and go, do you have all these things, and do we have to inspect them, and does it become a whole different process? And I don't know how deep we want to get into that.
So if we, I guess, when it does come back, GC, if this passes, if we can get basically a little summary on liability and what that would mean for the town.
We have enough of our own issues.
Definitely,
Thank
Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Thompson, second time.
Thank you. I guess just for clarification, if council doesn't pass this in time for, let's say, this year's season, would it just continue forward as it has in the past? People would still continue to offer, backyard school instructions, the only caveat being that they couldn't apply for the grants from the region. It would just be business as usual.
I would say probably, but if someone was to complain, then we would have to actually enforce it.
So then my second question is if town moves forward with this and implements what's being put in front of us, if a property owner chooses not to come forward to the Committee of Adjustments, but still continues to offer swim instructions in their backyard, is it again only a case that if a complaint is brought forward, would we take action? Or
yes.
So we would be fine with them not complying with the zoning bylaw as long as there are no complaints?
Well, I'd say that if until we know that they're not complying.
Well, we might know, but just nobody's complaining.
Mr. Waters? Yeah, welcome to bylaw services. That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's complaint driven.
I'm just clear. Just
I can't mention, and this is off, maybe a little bit off topic, but I know that Councillor Kim and myself are looking at something with proactive bylaw. So we're looking into it and we're having discussions. But
and would they need a warrant to get into the backyard to confirm
well,
this?
let's not go there right now. We've already gone through that last term. We don't need to keep going back there. But thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So just listening to the conversations around the table and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters, you had said that if council gives direction to look into permitting. So I'm just wondering, since Councillor Humphreys has talked about delegated authority, permitting has come up, are these recommendations going to be included on the report as alternative recommendations?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, depending on the ability to delegate these things may not need an alternative recommendation. So, but if we need to make adjustments to the delegation bylaw to allow this to happen, then we will provide that as a recommendation up front in the report.
Councillor?
Thank you. So you're suggesting, just about the permitting, I just don't want to get this report and then all of us are talking and we decide, well, we want to have more information about the permitting, but yet we could already have that kind of information there to kind of help us make a decision. And I don't want to delay the process any longer than waiting for another report. So is that something that you'll be able to provide at the same time? It's a different scenario?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just trying to understand the councillor's question. So the councillor is asking whether we would look at an approach through bylaw, through licensing or something instead of, we could do that. It's just we'd have to do the proper research and conversations with bylaw. Given the time restrictions, we're hoping to bring our report forward on the 21st. That could potentially delay us, given the timelines internally to have that report processed and reviewed within the town. So we can look at it, and hopefully it won't delay us in moving forward on the 21st of April, as we're suggesting here.
Councillor?
Thank you. It would be nice if at least you could at least look into it and see if there's something you could have prepared or presented, because I feel like we are going to want to have some information further about that process if we were not really in favor in the committee adjustment route. Right. It would just kind of help us not hold up the process any longer if you can look into that.
Thank you. And I would just maybe suggest that I'm sure there's a couple of other municipalities that might do some licensing. And if maybe we can just quickly look at what they're doing and maybe just have that as an example in that report, that would give us enough information of maybe if that's something that we would rather look at.
Sorry, just to clarify, licensing for this specific use?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm just saying, if you take that example from someone else, you don't necessarily have to do a deep dive. You can just take that example, say, here's what they're doing, and you can kind of show us, and that way we have an understanding. Say, take a look at, maybe it's the City of Toronto, and say, take a look at what they're doing. This is what they're doing. Here's their information. That way it's not a deep dive, it's just a overview. And we can decide whether we, at that point, whether we want staff, that we rather have you go this way and maybe do a deep dive into that one. Is that good? Councillor? Mm-hmm.
Municipalities are, maybe we can get that information in advance so we can kind of do our own little research on that. If you identify St. Catharines as a municipality, then maybe it'd be good if we had that link or that information in advance of that meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm not going to go through it. I think we've all said is the costs, you know, I mean, these are university students, be prohibitive, but I mean, I think at the same time, as we all said, we want some checks and balances, because last thing we want is an aquatic center happening on Wells Street. I don't think anyone would want to see that. So you want to make sure that there's some, there is some, you know, we have some say in how this is allowed to roll out, but definitely, you know, I think having a fee of $2,300 roughly or more, not only is it costly, but it could prevent certain families from being able to allow their kid to even to entertain this as a thought. So I think that's a little bit problematic as well. And so we want to make sure that they have the ability to you know, become entrepreneurs and run a possibly you know, a swimming school. So I think staff have heard the comments around the table. They'll hopefully bring it back within that GC report. And so I will call the vote, Council. That carries. Confirming bylaw. Councillor Gallo. Councillor Kim. Call the vote. Oh, I called the vote. I'll let you say it after the vote. Quickly, yes. That carries. I don't know. Councillor Gardner, I'll allow you to speak just but quickly, because
I would just like to thank our new staff, Mr. Terry, for sitting through this long evening. Welcome to the town of Aurora.
Well, I can tell you he's been here a couple days, so he hasn't left yet. So far, if he doesn't leave tomorrow, then that means he's okay. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Councilor Carter. Motion to adjourn?
Oh.
Councilor Gilliland, Councilor Gardner, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.